These bags are everywhere. But what is the origin of this iconic design? The answer may surprise you. According to a New York Times article about the plastic bags of New York City, these designs are generally not copyrighted and the original sources are often hard to find. But I decided to dig a little deeper. Cheap plastic shopping bags became widespread in America during the late 1970s, and a bit of searching led me to an eBay listing for this plastic Radio Shack bag, allegedly from 1979. The similarity of this design to the one used on the thank you bags is striking. However, upon further investigation, I found many other examples of vintage bags from the same era that use a similar design motif. Now, I'm sure at some point in time, some graphic designer somewhere sat down and first decided to place a repeated series of outlined type with one or two filled in on a plastic bag. And perhaps with enough time and effort, this person could be tracked down, much in the same way a community of Redditors eventually found the name of the designer who created the much beloved jazz pattern found on disposable drink cups. But I am just not enough of an investigative journalist to go down this rabbit hole. I'm actually not an investigative journalist at all. Graphic design, especially when you're talking about simple typographic compositions like this one, is often a reflection of popular trends. And because this visual concept has been so widely adapted and imitated, my guess is that whoever may have done it first is a name that is most likely buried in the sands of time. And when I said earlier that the answer would surprise you, I'm sorry if this is either A, not a surprise, or B, not the sort of surprise you were hoping for. But let's take a few steps back. If you need to use plastic or paper bags for your business, it seems like the best choice from a marketing perspective is to create a unique design with your logo or other graphic elements so that as those bags are dispersed into the world, they catch people's eyes and remind consumers where they came from. But if you can't afford to have custom bags printed, the cheaper option is clearly to stock up on a set of generic bags. Of course, you don't have to go with this design. There are countless variations and other recognizable graphics to choose from, but there is a common theme that runs through almost all of them. Have you figured it out yet? That's right, they say thank you. And often they also throw in a little have a nice day as well, because why not? The average American says some variation of thank you nearly 39 times per day. And if that number sounds way too high, it's because I just made it up. But perhaps the better question is not how many times we say thank you, but when we say it, how often do we actually mean it? To answer this question, let's turn to everyone's favorite form of interpersonal communication, email. When I'm not making YouTube videos, which is to say when I'm actually trying to earn money as opposed to pouring myself into a hugely time-consuming hobby that is fueled mostly by delusions of grandeur and the faint hope of some eventual viral success, I work as a freelance graphic designer, which requires, among other things, sending cheerful and upbeat emails to clients that convey just the right balance of professionalism and casual relatability. One funny thing about emails is that you can end up signing them off with a thanks without any reason to be at all thankful to the person you're communicating with. In fact, because I prefer to sign off most of my emails with cheers, I think it sounds chill and mildly British, I often reserve thanks for more formal and even somewhat stern emails. But I don't, under any circumstances, want this to turn into a video about email etiquette, so the broader point I'm trying to make is that when it comes to text-based communication, there is usually some effort made to convey the tone with which you want your words to be read. It may feel a bit superfluous to pepper your communications with gratuitous amounts of thanks, exclamation point, or hope your week is off to a good start, exclamation point, or have a great rest of your week, 2 exclamation points, but the alternative often feels like running the risk of sounding a bit cold and robotic. And I was going to throw something in here about texting and emojis and how in workplace communications, Slack can often feel more easygoing and casual, but I think we get it. And if you work in any field remotely tech-related, you definitely get it, and I'm sorry. One group of people who may not get this quite as much, at least not at first, are children. Most of us are taught by our parents to say thank you in various situations that don't automatically occur to us, and as we get older, it just sort of becomes second nature. And ironically enough, the people who deserve the most gratitude from us as kids, the people who clean up for us, do our laundry, pack our lunches, and generally just wait on us hand and foot, don't even get close to the amount of thanks they probably deserve. Which is not to say we were all so-called ungrateful children, it's just that directly thanking people is often used more as a way to communicate respect to friends and strangers. It's sort of a currency for helping to maintain strong social cohesion, or something like that. According to a Psychology Today article, it was the invasion of the Normans that introduced the so-called courtesy culture of French nobility to the Anglo-Saxons back in the 11th century. In the 18th century, expressing gratitude along with other types of polite speech such as greetings and complimenting was integral to showing that one was of the right class and breeding. Then, in the 19th century, thanking everyone, regardless of social status, started to become the norm. Nowadays, especially in American culture, it can be easy to become a bit cynical about the constant need to thank everybody for everything all the time. It starts to feel like everyday interactions are drenched in a sort of mutually agreed upon fake positivity. We can all conjure an image of the worn-down cashier who's practically grinding their teeth as they force out another "thanks, have a nice day," when they clearly have no real reason to be at all thankful to the customer they're serving and definitely don't care if that person goes on to have a nice day. But maybe that's sort of an extreme example. Let's return to the restaurant, a bastion of hospitality where, at least in America, you are not only expected to thank your server, but also to tip them. In theory, as a way for you to evaluate the service and give an amount that is commensurate with how good you think it was, but in practice, it's just sort of a weird custom that is often hotly debated. Now, personally, I always feel bad when I see a customer being obviously rude and unreasonable towards a server, especially because no matter how much the waiter might try to smooth things over and continue to express politeness and gratitude towards the obstinate customer, they can still get stiffed on the tip. In my opinion, restaurant workers very much deserve the benefit of the doubt. Yes, there are times where service is inexcusably bad, or a waiter is just inexcusably rude, but in general, mistakes happen, and when a restaurant is busy, it's easy for the quality of service to dip a bit. So when I thank my server for essentially allowing me to just sit on my ass and demand that food and drink be brought to me, I mean it genuinely. I realize that I'm paying for the privilege, but I still very much appreciate the effort they put into making sure I have a good experience. And I like to think that as long as I was a reasonably pleasant guest, and assuming they don't totally hate their job or aren't having a really bad night, that when they thank me for coming in, those thanks are also genuine. As much as these little expressions of gratitude can feel ritualistic and sometimes empty of meaning, I think showing people that we value their time and effort is an important part of this transactional society that we live in. But it's worth pointing out that language and customs do change over time. A 2018 Huffington Post article discusses how responding to thanks with "you're welcome" has fallen out of popularity, being instead replaced with a more casual array of "no worries," "sure thing," "you bet," etc. While the article makes the point that much of this stems from a learned politeness formula, and that the reason for this shift is in some ways just an arbitrary evolution of language, they also discuss the possibility that saying "you're welcome" indeed implies a slightly different feeling than, say, "no problem." Saying "you're welcome" kind of implies that you did indeed do someone a favor and you deserve the thanks they are giving to you for doing it. "No problem," or some variation thereof, on the other hand, is what's known as something of a linguistic minimizer. You're saying it really was no sweat off your back to help them out, it was just the right thing to do. Apparently, there is also a sort of generational divide where some baby boomers still view "you're welcome" as the correct, polite response, whereas many millennials only ever say "you're welcome" as a sort of sarcastic retort. As a millennial, I personally am in favor of what I perceive to be a move towards more casual language in everyday life. I sometimes imagine a future where all those carefully crafted emails we often dread writing are by and large replaced with more casual text message style back and forths, and I think in many places this is already starting to happen. I sometimes take this one step further and imagine a future where the use of slang has become so ubiquitous that even in the most formal of settings, people still use it. Hey, dude, it's Dr. John. Listen, I got your labs back, and I hate to kind of mess with your vibe today, but it's definitely cancer, and it's a pretty gnarly kind. But the point is that whether I'm ending a Zoom meeting with an impressively formal "thank you all so much for your time today," or simply hitting my buddy with a quick "thanks, bro," I think deep down the sentiment is much the same. Sure, it can feel a bit excessive to be handed your food in a bag that says "thank you" on it 7 times, and it can seem a little silly when a sign thanks you for not smoking. How does the sign know that I'm not smoking? But underneath the expected words and customs, I believe there's a very human need to express positive emotions to each other. I imagine if you ran an experiment where you completely stopped saying "thank you" for a week and didn't replace it with any other form of pleasantry, you'd quickly discover what it is like for people to treat you as if you're an asshole. And if we didn't have these customs, it would probably be a little harder to suss out who actually is an asshole and perhaps who is actually a sociopath. Now, I'm not going to conclude with some worn out trope about the power of gratitude, because I think at the end of the day we do all get it. And even if you don't get it, you're probably just going to keep playing along with it anyway, because that's what society expects of you. So I'm also not going to ask you to like this video or subscribe to my channel. Instead, I'm going to thank you for already having done those things, because if you have already done those things, you definitely deserve my gratitude. And if you haven't done any of those things, maybe all of this has been enough to confuse you into doing them anyway. See you next time.